Hello, today we will be presenting our debate group project for professional issues in applied behavior analysis over the causes of autism. In our group, we have Carlton, Lacey, Aaron, Nicole, and myself, Shatika. This is my fourth semester at Ball State, and I'm currently a stay home mom to focus more on my education. I have worked in the special education field for the last 5 years. We will be debating over environmental factors such as chemical exposures, MMR vaccines, and genetics on how they may or may not have an influence on the causes of autism spectrum disorder. Our group roles consist of Carlton arguing the pro factors of environmental causes. He will be speaking on preconception exposures, gestational exposure, childhood exposures, and MMR vaccines. Lacey will be debating against him with the con factors of these environmental issues. Aaron will be discussing the progenetic factors, focusing on genetic studies like molecules, family genes, and abnormal chromosomes, while Nicole counteracts with the congenetic factors. I will be providing the introduction and conclusion to our debate. I have personally experienced this topic in my life. I have a son that is nonverbal and severely autistic. I started noticing signs when he was about 2 years of age. It wasn't until he was 4 years old when he was diagnosed with ASD. During my pregnancy, I was supposed to have a procedure done to keep my cervix closed and placed on bed rest to prevent preterm labor. Needless to say, the doctor did neither of these things, and even though he had my records from my previous high risk pregnancy, my son was born at 26 weeks, weighing only 1 pound and 15 ounces. Like any other mother, I thought I was going to have the perfect pregnancy. My son was hospitalized for the first 11 months of his life, and when he came home, he faced many challenges medically and physically that kept him in and out of the hospital for about 7 years and caused him to be developmentally delayed. He had a tracheostomy and a feeding tube placed when he was 8 months old. He is now 11 years old and has been without the trach for about 2 years. He receives ABA therapy 5 days a week and speech and occupational therapy once a week. We do not have any family history of autism or any other disabilities on either side of our families. It is said that his extreme prematurity and medical conditions was the cause of his autism.
Hello, my name is Carlton Lee, and this is my fourth semester at Ball State University. I've been in the ABA field for approximately 3 years, and I've heard a lot of misconceptions on the causes of autism. In my professional work experience, my specialty is in early interventions treatment with children diagnosed with ASD. I was fortunate enough so far in my career to work with children that ranges within the spectrum from nonverbal to high functioning. In this debate, I'll be addressing the pro-environmental causes of autism and how the environment plays a huge role in a child receiving an ASD diagnosis. Some will say that who we are is defined by the genetic code passed to us by our mother and father. Other scientists claim that the environment in which a child grows up will explain future characteristics and behaviors. While these two seem like polar opposites, many people actually support a position from these two schools of thought. Autism spectrum disorder research so far doesn't support a causal effect for any certain case yet. However, there are previous studies that show that environmental factors play a huge role in the increased prevalence rate of ASD. In other words, something in the immediate environment like smoke, aggression, chemical exposures can affect a child's development early on. Therefore, a plausible link between the environment and ASD shows a more favorable factor. Similarly, there are other factors which can be present, such as a chemical imbalance, viruses or chemicals, or a lack of oxygen at birth. When pregnant mothers get exposed to chemical conditions, the prevalent rate of autism increases significantly for the child. It was reported by Rosalind Fryer in 2014 that 190 articles had been published in relation to environmental toxicants and autism spectrum disorders, also known as ASD, since the 1970s. 89% of those articles had implicated an association with ASD. The potential associations with ASD and environmental toxicants were examined by Rosamund Fryer's research article and examined in 3 different developmental phases: the preconception exposure, gestational exposure, and childhood exposure. A study conducted by Coleman in 1976 reported that the parents of the children who had an ASD diagnosis were significantly more likely to work in an occupation involving chemical exposures during the period of preconception. The toxicant and chemical exposure during the early stages of the preconception stage shows a direct increase in receiving an ASD diagnosis. A retrospective case study was conducted through the California Department of Developmental Services, known as CDDS. This study had analyzed the effects of pesticide exposure during pregnancy. The pesticide exposure was measured by the distance from the site itself, and this study had shown that from the exposure site, the lesser distance had an associated increased risk of ASD compared to the further distance. It was reported by researchers that during the gestational period, pregnant women who take thalidomide between 20 and 24 of gestation had a higher risk of birth defects, and the most common association is ASD. The following map showcases the amount of chemical pesticides used in agriculture across the nation. California is the top agriculture producing state in the nation, and it produces approximately 200 million pounds of pesticides, and it's applied in California each year. Childhood autism risks from genetics and environment, also known as CHARGE, reported a case control study that approximately 1/3 of CHARGE study mothers lived during pregnancy within a 1.5 kilometers of an agricultural pesticide application. Proximity to organophosphates at some point during gestation was associated with a 60% increased risk for ASD, higher for 3rd trimester exposures. Toxic waste sites had been examined, and 2 studies had shown an association between ASD and the residential area of the child's location. A case study that consisted of 495 children with ASD had reported that the prevalence rate of ASD was a lot higher due to the proximity of the Superfund sites. This study also provided relevant information based on school districts as well. Minnesota Department of Education, back in the school year of 2007 and 2008, had reported that higher rates of ASD were significantly more likely to be located within a 20-mile radius from a Superfund site. MMR vaccines have been widely documented with numerous research and debates and the controversial pro-arguments that there's a link between vaccinations and ASD. The time frame between the administration of MMR vaccines and the diagnosis of a young individual with ASD seems to have a correlation. It's highly plausible that there is a connection between the 2 factors. Exposure to the misrol, it has a mercury-based preservative that's commonly found in vaccinations during the first 15 months of life, was suggested to be a significant association with ASD and other ASD-related disorders. A lot of research that I've mentioned in this pro-argument sets up a solid case in determining that the environment plays a huge role in the association of developmental disorders. Most commonly, each study that was reviewed from this pro-argument has shown that ASD has the highest rate amongst all developmental disorders. More extensive research should be continued and thoroughly conducted in order to solidify a probable cause of autism.
Hi there, my name is Lacey Sanderson. This is my 3rd semester at Ball State. I have years now. Through the years, I've listened to parents at my center openly discuss their children and their diagnosis. Because there is no sole cause for autism spectrum disorders right now, their different stories are interesting to hear. A few moms had very difficult pregnancies. Some of the parents were in their 40s when they had their child, and other kiddos were typically developing until the age of 2 or 3 and then suddenly regressed. Every single family had a unique circumstance with a different theory. Was their child diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders because of genetics or environmental factors? The idea of exploring preventable environmental causes of autism spectrum disorders and other neurodevelopmental disorders has been growing. Some of these environmental causes include chemical exposure, and vaccinations. I will touch base on both of these theories and explain why they are not the sole cause of autism spectrum disorders. The idea of exploring preventable when it comes to science, there's no question about it that immunizations are a huge step forward in healthcare history. However, even though these vaccines are helping to prevent diseases, individuals worry they may be causing other issues. Surveys show that parents and other individuals associate environmental factors to the cause of autism spectrum disorders. One of these environmental factors include vaccinations such as the measles, mumps, rubella, or MMR vaccine. Now, why would these individuals believe this? According to Rowan Andrade, 2011, in 1998, a British scientist named Andrew Wakefield, along with a dozen other scientists, conducted a tiny study with 12 children and published a paper in an esteemed medical journal. This study suggested a causal link between the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine combination and autism spectrum disorders. With ASD on the rise and a desperate search for answers, the study received immediate reactions from frightened parents in both Britain and the United States. And the press covered the news widely. Wakefield's paper had many flaws, however. The data was manipulated and the findings were never replicated. On top of this, it was revealed that Wakefield had a financial conflict of interest when he was paid by attorneys who were looking for evidence to use against vaccine manufacturers. There was a retraction by most of the co-authors, then the entire paper was retracted, and in the end, Wakefield lost his medical license. Over the next decade, the possibility of a link between the MMR vaccine and autism spectrum disorders was studied exhaustively. No reputable study confirmed this finding. Actually, large-scale studies across countries have proven there is no leak found at all. Nonetheless, overall levels of vaccinations have decreased over the years. According to Jane et al. 2015, a recent survey stated that nearly 20% of 486 parents of children with autism spectrum disorders decided to decline or delay their MMR vaccinations for their younger siblings of those children. This puts not only those individuals without vaccinations at risk, but also the entire public due to potential outbreaks. Another environmental factor thought to be related to the cause of autism spectrum disorders is chemical exposure. However, according to Ross et al. 2014, no specific environmental toxicant has been consistently associated with increased risk of autism spectrum disorders. The Harvard study included 116,430 pregnant women, and data was collected on where they lived and the levels of particulate pollution. No association was found between autism spectrum disorders and air pollution before pregnancy, early pregnancy, or after birth. Another form of common chemical includes antidepressant medications. According to Sorensen et al. 2013, both the use of antidepressants during pregnancy and the prevalence of autism spectrum disorders has increased recently. A suggestion of a causal link has been mentioned, so an association between the two were investigated in Denmark. The study controlled confounding variables, and the results actually showed there was no association between prenatal exposure to antidepressant medications and ASD in the child. Although research is increasing, it is still not fully understood how or if chemical exposure has a significant effect on children's development. According to Goldman and Koduru, 2000, some research suggests ASD may be linked to both genetic and environmental factors, such as chemical exposures. However, there has been little effort to conduct extensive research related to environmental factors such as chemical exposures. This research is needed to confirm the role that the environment has on development and behavioral measures. Therefore, there has not been sufficient evidence that chemical exposures or vaccinations are a cause for autism spectrum disorders.
Hello, my name is Erin. This is my third semester at Ball State, and I work as an ABA therapist in Pennsylvania. In my short time in the field, I have worked with many families where siblings have been diagnosed with autism. In families that do not have multiple diagnoses, It may be obvious at times that environmental factors, which many believe to cause autism, are not present. Therefore, the following points prove why autism spectrum disorders is believed to be caused by one's genetics. Genetic studies in the field of autistic disorders have mainly focused on molecular genetic studies, assessment of chromosomal abnormalities, twin studies, and family studies. Family studies, which was performed at UCLA, showed significant recurrent risks in large Utah families. The recurrent risk was 8.6%, and for families with 2 or more affected children, the recurrent risk approached 35%. Additionally, twin studies provided a wealth of results which concluded that genetics caused ASD. Concordance among twins enables to measure heritability and determines what percent of the phenotype is affected by genetic factors. Identical twins share 100% of the genetic material, whereas fraternal twins share 50% of the genetic material. Twin studies show a higher concordance rate for identical twins compared to fraternal twins. Twin studies demonstrated an average autism inheritance of 90%. Molecular genetic studies examining the relationships of neuroxins revealed that a mutation in neuroxins have been also linked with autism. There are 3 main ways to examine one's gene. They include the genome scanning method, molecular studies, and candidate gene studies, which examine the relationship of genes and the effect on brain development. These studies have demonstrated that chromosome variations may play an important role in autism. For example, the deletion of chromosome 16p11 is linked to Asperger's syndrome, mental retardation, and developmental abnormalities. Duplications of chromosome 15 have been proven to contribute to autism development. Also, duplications of the GABA receptor gene are present in expecting mothers who have given birth to children who develop ASD. Lastly, chromosome 7 has been associated in various studies with autism, language delay, and epilepsy. The following visual provides an example of what chromosome 7 looks like in a healthy person and what it looks like in an individual with autism. On the left, the picture illustrates the chromosome in a curved line. This is what it is supposed to look like. On the right, the chromosome appears to have a gap. The edges are thick, and in the middle, the section is very thin. The right illustrates a mutation in chromosome 7, which is believed to cause the autism spectrum disorder.
My name is Nicole Beasley, and this is my 3rd semester at Ball State University. I have been working in the ABA and autism field in Cleveland, Ohio for almost 4 years. My current position at an autism school has enabled me to meet many students who are the only ones in their families with an autism diagnosis. Some of these students have a sibling with a developmental disability, but I have only met 3 sets of siblings and families who have multiple cases of ASD. One family that attends the autism school I work at has a total of 4 children, 3 boys and 1 girl. The 3 boys all have autism, while the daughter, the youngest, does not have any disabilities. The oldest boy, I'll refer to him as M, was diagnosed at 3 years old and began receiving services. The 2 other boys, fraternal twins H and C, both received an autism diagnosis early on in their life as well. All 3 boys are very similar in their behavior and functioning level. I recently learned that this family participated in numerous sibling and twin studies at the Cleveland Clinic Center for Autism in Cleveland, Ohio, throughout their early childhood. For one family to have so many autism diagnoses is surprising and quite rare. This situation would suggest that autism must be hereditary. That's a common and widely accepted theory, but many families only have one single diagnosis. I will be exploring the theory that genetics do not cause autism. Genetic studies assess chromosomal abnormalities twin and family studies. Genetic flaws make the disease more likely, but does not necessarily cause the disease. Much of scientific evidence is based upon correlation of variables. As evidence-based practitioners, we need to remember that correlation does not necessarily mean causation. A common question is there an autism gene? Hereditary studies discuss the possibility of an autism gene. Two popular theories are whether the cause is from one single gene or a multi-gene factor. The single gene theory focuses on chromosome 16p11 deletion or duplication. A 2008 study found that only 1% of autistic individuals had this deletion. The multi-gene theory discusses the combination of variants of genes. Studies have shown that this theory only has a small effect of increasing the risk of autism. In family studies, results have shown that parents of autistic children are usually non-autistic themselves. Autism is said to be caused by chromosomal abnormalities at conception. Structural chromosomal variations play an important role in the etiology of autism. A concept known as sporadic autism is caused by spontaneous mutation after conception. Variations have been identified in only 7 to 10% of sporadic autism cases. Concordance in siblings is only between 0 and 23%. That is less than a quarter of a chance that the children will have inherited the autism gene. Twin studies also fail to find 100% concordance. Identical or monozygotic twins share 100% of the genetic material, but have a broad heritability range when it comes to an autism diagnosis. Twin studies show a higher concordance in monozygotic than dizygotic twins, but some studies found it is still only about 60% compared to 1 to 30%. Chromosomal mutations have variable expressivity, and the effects manifest differently in each individual. Spontaneous mutations can occur in one twin and not the other. If twins have the same genetic makeup, shouldn't they have the same chance at inheriting autism? The data concludes that even though families of individuals with autism may also receive the same diagnosis, there is no one gene proven to be the sole cause of autism. The inability to determine one chromosomal abnormality weakens the argument of a genetic cause. Variations across family and twin studies proves autism does not run in the family 100% of the time. If autism spectrum disorder is hereditary, wouldn't the concordance be higher in siblings? The inability to find this so-called autism gene and inconsistencies in genetic mutations does not effectively support the theory that autism is caused by genetics.
In closing to our debate, there are many factors that can be argued over the causes of autism. Environmental factors can have an impact on these causes. Over the years, researchers have studied several risk factors over this topic. Therefore, because of potential exposures of toxins in our environment, there is a risk of them causing autism. This is one of the reasons explaining why doctors may stress to expecting mothers the importance of staying away from chemicals like mercury and lead during their pregnancies. All three of these phases of exposures are vital. Some studies show that a child can be affected by these issues even before conception happens. However, there are some studies that give explanations on why it is said that these environmental factors have no impact on the causes of autism. Genetics is another factor that comes up when discussing the causes of autism. Based on some studies, identical twins sharing the same genes are much more likely to have ASD than fraternal twins. Some researchers believe that when family members with ASD have ASD, there is a greater chance that future family members could have ASD as well. This proves that genetics can be a cause of autism. However, it is to be argued that genetics focusing on family genes does not influence ASD. The incorporation of ABA therapy will be beneficial to the clients with ASD by providing them with interventions that will help them improve their socially significant behaviors. As a BCBA, it will be our responsibility to educate our clients and their families over the potential causes of autism prior to beginning treatment plans. A behavior analyst should communicate both the pros and cons of the causes of autism. This falls under Ethnic Code 2.0 Behavior Analyst Responsibilities to Clients. BCBAs are obligated to operate in the best interests of the client. This meaning that the analyst should provide families with the most accurate information concerning their family's needs. It is important for behavior analysts to attend trainings, conferences, and stay up to date with research articles that can be beneficial to their clients. Thank you for taking the time out to listen to our debate over the causes of autism.